Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate Day 418, Thursday, May the 3rd, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Much to get to. Let's see how well we do. Well, the whispers in D.C. were that the IG report was coming out on the 8th of May. The 8th of May. Today is the 3rd, right? But former U.S. Attorney for the state of Utah says that the Inspector General is releasing the report on the 5th. May the 5th. Now that probably means it will be released to the DOJ on the 5th and to Congress and to the press on the 8th. That's my guess. Because normally there is a couple day lag. Once the IG gives it to the DOJ, then they release it to the Congress. They may do some redactions or what have you. I don't know. I assume that would be the case. So I think that may be what he's talking about, is that the IG releases it on the 5th to the DOJ, and then we should see it or have it released to the Congress and the press on the 8th of May. So we're very close. Soon, we are going to find out if Horowitz is a straight shooter. We are about to find out how Horowitz, the custodian, is going to try and clean up this mess without destroying what little credibility the DOJ and the FBI have left. And that really is the challenge for the custodian. How do you expose the wrongdoing, and in probably many cases criminal wrongdoing, and still leave the DOJ and the FBI with their credibility, which is in question now? And it's a sticky issue. But the IG, that's, I think, what he has to do is do his job. And I think he probably will, based on what we've seen. He will point out where the problems were, what was done, and who did it. I don't expect he's going to lay out a broad conspiracy that we're talking about here. I think he's going to focus on individual violations as he goes through the investigation into the email, the investigation of the Clinton emails, investigation of the Clinton Foundation, the FISA warrants, the dossier, Chris Steele. All these things are things that the IG is looking into. And I expect that what he's going to do is look into them and give us the facts, tell us what happened. He will probably make criminal referrals. We know that he has Mr. Huber working with him, and we know that they have a grand jury. So, and we know they have been interviewing people in front of this grand jury. So we will have to wait and see. We're very, very close, but I expect that that's what will happen. If the things that we know about that are in the public record and additional things are in that IG report, and I expect they will be, then I can't possibly see how Comey and McCabe would receive additional criminal referrals. Comey would receive criminal referrals. Lynch and Yates, likely, criminal referrals, as well as the individuals in the small group, Mr. Rybicki and the whole gang. And as far as getting into the FISA warrants, of course, that would include Comey again, Rodenstein, and others. So you could have multiple criminal referrals coming out of the IG report. And because of who they're focused on, specifically on Comey and Rodenstein, that should be the end of the Mueller investigation. Which brings us to our next topic. Is Mueller's next play, Uncle Bob the executioner, is his next power play to set up a constitutional crisis? The questions that we saw leaked, whether they are the real questions, samples of questions, or what have you, that's what we saw. That was what was leaked. Those questions were ridiculous. No lawyer would let their client answer such questions. And Mueller knows this. The Washington Post is reporting that Mueller threatened Trump's lawyers that he would subpoena Trump to appear for a grand jury testimony. Well, that raises several different issues we'll get to in just a moment. But we do know from what we've seen from some lawyers who have gone on TV to comment on this, including Dershowitz and others, is you have to question first, does Mueller even have this authority? because this is not automatic authority granted to a special counsel. It must be specifically stated as part of his mandate that he may subpoena his targets. And in this case, we're talking about Trump, which is different because he is the president. He's the head of the executive branch. Mueller is an employee, a temporary employee of the executive branch. There are Article 2 protections for a president that we know of, that are case law, that are precedent, that a president cannot be dragged into criminal court and asked to and be questioned about a criminal investigation of which he is the target, or as he's the one that's being focused on or looked at for possible criminal violation, which is exactly what Mueller's little questions are all about. They're trying to focus in on the possible obstruction, meaning Trump firing Comey to end the Russia investigation or affect the Russia investigation. Therefore, that's saying that his questions would be focused on Trump as a subject of the criminal investigation. And you cannot do that. It's an Article 2 issue, and it was put in place because they didn't want a president to be constantly dragged into court and questioned about these things, criminal investigations, because the president has to run the country. And what they decided was, well, if you have some issues, criminal issues, then you have to wait till after he leaves office. That is the issue there. So, what is going on? Well, this power play that I'm talking about will likely work in concert with the media and the deep state. The operatives, who are still busy within the system, trying to frame Trump, using leaking of information, planting false stories, planting false information, and all these other things. So that is the question. Is the purpose of Mueller, what he did, is his overall purpose to set up a constitutional crisis? It would be a phony constitutional crisis on one hand, but a real one on the other, because you would have a situation where you have a special counsel trying to drag the president into criminal court and question him, or have him sit down and do a Q&A where you have a heavily biased prosecution team who are trying to run a setup or a perjury trap. So there's a lot of issues. So here's how it looks to me. I see this. There's really two main things that have happened and are happening. First was they had to stop Trump from being elected. They failed. So the next plan became to destroy his presidency, either force him to resign, impeach him, or just destroy him and everyone around him. The ultimate goal being to drive him out of office. And another primary goal would be also that they must win, Democrats must win in 2018. They must take back the House so they can stop the investigations and move to impeach. The stakes are extremely high. That's why they brought in Uncle Bob the Executioner. The stakes are very, very high. They have everything on the line and everything to lose. If they do not win back the House, the investigations continue and probably result in many of these people being indicted, going to jail, or at least being outed as being involved in criminal activity. It would certainly be bad for the Democrats. And you have other issues out there with Uranium One that involve Mueller himself and Rodenstein involved in both of those things. So it appears to me that these other things have failed. They were not successful in stopping him from getting elected. They have not been successful in the frame-up to link him to anything having to do with Russia. That is now admitted by just about everyone, including Mueller, telling Giuliani, no, we have no Russia-Trump collusion whatsoever. That's done. That's over. We can assure you that we have investigated that and we have nothing. We're not even looking at that. We're looking at obstruction. That's where they've moved to next, the obstruction. But the problem is that the obstruction is going to be very, very tough for the reasons I just mentioned. So the next thing that they have to do is to take it to another level. And this is political. This is why it's all political. Because if you can get the president into a situation where you issue a subpoena and he refuses because his lawyers tell him that you're not going to do it, or if they say, we want you to answer these questions, and Trump's lawyers say, no, we don't want you to do that, then they can easily come back and say, well, see, he doesn't want to answer the questions because he's obviously guilty. If they launch a subpoena and Trump's attorneys say, no, we're not going to let you testify in a criminal trial, we're going to fight this in the courts, then they can say, see, he will not stand for questioning in front of a grand jury because he's guilty. They're going to use all this for politics. And they can also take it to the level of constitutional crisis, because if Trump's lawyers say, no, we're going to fight the subpoena, then special counsel can then say, okay, we're going to combat you. We are going to fight you over that subpoena to try to force you to testify. At which point, the word will go out to the deep state operators, who will then flood the airwaves along with their friends in the media and begin this hour by hour, minute by minute crisis. And it will last all the way to the 2018 elections. Every day, it will be CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, CNN, everywhere you look. Crisis, America in crisis, constitutional crisis, the president versus this. This is how they'll do it. It'll be theatrical. It will be a major rollout of a major propaganda campaign to get everyone to believe that we've just been put into this major constitutional crisis and everything has to be put on hold while the country sits on the edge of their seat, gripping, waiting to see what happens in the constitutional crisis, hoping that they can create so many problems that, and when the 2018 elections come around, that this will have driven down the Republican vote in support for Trump and will have heavily motivated Democratic voters, because they must win the House back in 2018 to stop the investigations and protect their own asses from the crimes they have committed. Everything is on the line. The stakes are very high. Now, how is Giuliani playing it? He's playing it exactly the way I said you should. He didn't come out and say, well, no, Trump's not going to answer those questions at all. What Giuliani said is, no, we're not going to agree to those questions. 12 hours worth of questioning, follow-up questions about what did he think, what did he feel, questions about this, questions about that. No, we're not going to agree to that at all. So we're going to have to get together and talk about it. So what Giuliani is playing is Giuliani is taking that card away, which is what I suggested you do. You take that card away, you turn it into negotiations, and you play run the clock out until 2018. You get together and say, well, boy, we don't agree, but let's get back together again in a couple weeks and talk about it and see if we can, see where we can agree. And you drag it on as far as you possibly can until Mueller is finally forced to say, okay, I'm going to issue the subpoena. By now, we're probably in the middle of July or maybe August. We're getting close to the election. And then you can begin to make your arguments against the subpoena. You deprive them of the opportunity to turn this into a constitutional crisis, which is exactly what they want to do. And I think Giuliani knows that. And I think, because he understands the politics of it, so does Jay Sekulow and other people around Trump, probably Trump as well. You cannot let them take this and turn it into a propaganda tool. And I think if they did go to court, I think there's 3 or 4 good arguments, at least 2 of them are, I think, slam dunks that they will have in the courts to prevent Trump from having to testify. But what you want to prevent, actually, is the entire affair, because it will be turned into a major production number. It will turn into America in crisis, minute by minute, hour by hour, as it plays itself out through the entire summer into the election season. You can't let, and I think that's what this is all about, because Mueller knows he's going to have a hell of a time, and he knows it would go all the way to the Supreme Court. He's going to have a hell of a time forcing the president to testify in a criminal hearing where he is essentially the subject of an obstruction charge, because, again, this has been a law that's been in place for a long time, since the early 1800s, maybe even from the original beginnings. A president you cannot have a president sitting in court charged with a criminal violation testifying about a crime that he is the target of. Again, this is not something that can be done. So, we're going to see where it goes. And there's also separation of state issues, separation of power issues. I mean, there's a lot of issues that can be argued, and this could go on and on. But you don't want to go there because that is the constitutional crisis. So I think that what Giuliani is doing is playing his card exactly the way he should. He's giving the public and the media and Mueller reason to believe my client, Mr. Trump, dying to testify. He'd testify right now if we'd let him. But we're not going to let him because we don't like the deal. So we need to work on the deal. And you drag that out as long as you can. You drag it out for as long as you can. And that's exactly what you do. In the meantime, you're also knowing that the IG report is coming out. And you're knowing that in the obstruction, which is where they're focusing, that involves Comey and Rodenstein. Rodenstein has a big issue because he's the one who wrote the letter to Trump saying you should fire Comey. That he's not in a position anymore to lead the FBI. He's lost his ability to lead the FBI, and therefore he must be fired. And Trump, of course, fired Comey, but he did that interview with Lester Holt where he said he did it, for other reasons. So, for whatever reason, but again, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. He can fire anyone. And Mueller is saying, yeah, but if it's to obstruct a criminal investigation, then it's a crime. But there was no original crime. And as we're going to learn, an argument would also be made by Trump's lawyers of exactly how they got the investigation going based on a fraudulent warrant to the FISA warrant. And with all these people who were part of this, what we call a frame-up, a coup, whatever you want to call it, that's all going to be exposed in the IG report. So the reason why Giuliani is playing his card the way he is he knows exactly what the game is to try to use this propaganda campaign of putting the country into a constitutional crisis. Giuliani is going to deflate that as much as possible. He will fall back on going to court and fighting the subpoena if Mueller has the balls to issue it. And you also have a lot of pressure that will be on Rodenstein because he wrote the letter saying Comey should be fired. He also is the one who appointed Mueller. He's got a supreme conflict of interest. He certainly does. And he also is the one who appointed Mueller the day after he was rejected by Trump as the FBI director. So you have a lot of issues going on, and this is all going to come out in the IG report. So as you're slow walking as much as possible this affair you have going on, this dance you have going on with Mueller and his team about the interview, you're allowing the IG report to come out. You're allowing the other investigations to continue, and they will expose Comey, and eventually he will likely be have criminal referrals against him for various things he did, including lying. And so, if that's your key witness in the obstruction case, then it's going to be hard to put Comey up on the witness stand if you're Mueller and have him have any credibility at all. I think that the IG is going to destroy what's left of what little credibility Comey has left. So this is why you got to slow walk it and try to prevent them from being able to set up this constitutional crisis, because that's exactly what the game is. It's a propaganda campaign, just like everything else. Just like the Trump-Russia was propaganda and everything else that's been going on. There's no there. There's no crime there. There's no smoke. There's no fire. There's no simmering. There's nothing. There's not the odor. There's nothing. It's all a big nothing. But all they need is media propaganda, powerful media outlets, and Uncle Bob pushing a constitutional crisis because he wants to subpoena the president, and the president's lawyers are fighting it. This is a political operation. It's a political operation to continue what they've been doing, to do what they have to do, and that is to drive down Republican voters and highly motivate Democratic voters in 2018 to try to flip the House so they can save their asses. And that's the bottom line. Let's move on. That's my thoughts anyway. If anyone you disagree, or I'm sure if there's comments, people have other ideas, please put them in the comments section. I would love to know. James Comey has been interviewed by the IG at least once. It is Comey's testimony along with Lisa Page's text that sealed McCabe's fate. And when the IG report comes out, McCabe's troubles will multiply significantly. McCabe will likely do just as he said and burn the effing thing down. McCabe will turn and cut a deal. Comey and Lynch will be the two main conspirators that McCabe will have to turn on. Comey and McCabe, of course, still have that dispute, and that must be resolved. One of them is going to be proven to being a liar, and I believe it's going to be Comey. They are both liars, but I find it very hard to believe that McCabe is ordering Page and what's his name, the PR guy, ordering them to plant these stories in the Wall Street Journal. They've got all this going on. They're planting stories. You got Strzok planting stories. You got Page planting stories. Not just one, but many, doing all this stuff, and that Comey is completely oblivious that all this stuff is going on. I find that very hard to believe. Pre-Step knew it was all going on. Other people, obviously, this Jen person, other people, there's a dozen people, half dozen people in these meetings where they're talking about this stuff. Comey absolutely had to know. I think we're going to find out that Comey, and also Comey is not just directly denying that he was aware of what McCabe was doing. He's saying he can't recall. He can't recall. That means he doesn't know if there's any evidence to prove it. That's what that means. If he knew there was no evidence, he would flat deny it. He doesn't know there's no evidence. He hopes there's no evidence. That's why he's riding the fence and using terms like, I can't recall. Because that's not really lying if you say, I can't recall. It's just you couldn't remember. But when people like these people who are under pressure, see, because Comey would know. How would you not remember? I can't remember if my deputy was actually planting stories in major newspapers. I can't remember him telling me about that. I don't know. It's all going on around me. Everybody around me is doing it. The top tier of the FBI is all going on underneath me, and I know nothing about it. I just don't buy it. I think we're going to find out that Comey did in fact know about everything that was going on with those leaks to the Wall Street Journal and other places. That's my personal opinion. House Judiciary Chair Bob Goodlatte has requested a review of DOJ influence upon the Clinton investigation. He sent a letter to AG Sessions. He wants the AG to look at whether the DOJ Principal Assistant Attorney General Matthew Axelrod asserted undue influence on the FBI on their investigation of the Clinton Foundation. This was triggered by the IG report that outlined a conversation between Main Justice and FBI, which we talked about here. Axelrod and McCabe would be the primary targets for this probe. Yeah, we know that McCabe basically said, yeah, we got pressured by the Main Justice to back off the Clinton Foundation investigation. We have McCabe's actual words. He asked the question, you're asking me to back off this investigation? Is that what you're saying? That's exactly what he's saying when he's called on the phone. So, that should obviously be something the IG is going to dig deeply into, and we will learn more about. The Washington Examiner. Lawyers for both Special Executioner Robert Mueller and Michael Flynn have agreed to postpone Flynn's sentencing for 2 months. The matter is not ready for a sentencing hearing at this time. The same is true of Papadopoulos. He keeps getting his moved. His was moved now for the 3rd time. It's never going to happen. And I think Michael Flynn's in the same situation. It's probably never going to happen. Which means, really, the only guy who's actually been sentenced of the 5 people that Mueller has charged is the Dutch lawyer. He's the only guy who's actually going to be sentenced, assuming they don't do something with that. We have a recent poll of over 16,000 millennials shows support for Democrats has dropped 9% since 2016. They're losing the minority and women as well. The Dems are going the way of the Whigs because nobody likes to be around a loser. The Democrats have basically become a party of the extreme left, the left-wing ideology, and they have a track record of epic failure. Then they got caught rigging the primary. They have never admitted to it, apologized, and changed their ways. The extreme left fascists have taken over the Democratic Party. Middle America is not interested in that party at all, and you can see that in the polls. They're moving now 9% of millennials. That's huge. We know that blacks and minorities are, of course, also losing interest in the Democratic Party. That's why they have to rig everything. We have more crimes of the rotten Reverend Clinton revealed by Judicial Watch. Tom Fitton has received 281 pages of emails from the State Department. 10 of the emails contain classified information. You can read them on the Freedom Watch website, or Judicial. I think it's Freedom Watch, actually. Yeah. The emails were taken from her non-secure, non-state.gov email system. The emails detail collusion between the Clinton State Department and the Clinton Foundation. Clinton attempted to delete these emails, but she failed. It's a crime wave. Now, the DNC is now pushing back against the rotten Reverend Clinton. This is about a story we covered 2 days ago, where I told you that the rotten Reverend Clinton sold her, or rented her email list to the DNC for about $1.6 million or something. So now we have the Democrats, Democrat National Committee, pushing back against the rotten Reverend Clinton. They want their money back, and they want her to go away. A frustrated DNC official said in regards to Clinton charging the DNC $1.6 million to rent her list that, quote, Clinton does not realize that the DNC is dead broke and $6 million in the red, unquote. She does realize it, because she's the reason that her and Obama are the reason that you're dead broke and $6 million in the red. The DNC recently took a $2 million loan just to keep up with operating expenses. Yes, they did. The DNC official also says that, quote, keeping the Democratic National Committee in debt says a lot about the Clintons. And that's true. And, of course, we know the Democrats are desperate for cash for the 2018 midterms. This official also said it's the least that they could do considering the DNC rigged the primary for her, unquote. So you can see that there's no love lost between the rotten Reverend Clinton and the DNC. Obama's list was valued at about $4 million. He turned it over. Of course, he'd been president, so he couldn't serve, anymore anyway. He was done anyhow. But obviously, the rotten Reverend thinks that she may need those services again. She probably plans on running in 2020. That's my guess. But the crime wave has not stopped there. Nope. Tucker Carlson reporting the State Department and the rotten Reverend Clinton had a deal. The rotten Reverend Clinton was allowed to use her friends deep inside the deep state to help try and keep her out of trouble. Hillary and Huma were given unique permission to go to the State Department and remove digital and hard copy records from her time as Secretary of State. Says that there were personnel. Let's see, from her time as Secretary of State. Yes, she took personal records, but she also took official records. She wasn't supposed to do that. Schedules, call logs. Abadan took 5 boxes of physical materials out of her office, including a list of donors who gave gifts to the Clinton Foundation and actions taken by Clinton State Department based on gifts and donations. So she took the files or communications that would have shown the favors that were given to the people who donated to the Clinton Foundation. And so they were allowed to have that special privilege. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. We know how corrupt the State Department was under the rotten Reverend Clinton. That's just another crime by the rotten Reverend. It's hard to keep up with all the crimes of the rotten Reverend. Will the Attorney General Sessions put a stop to the Clinton crime wave? That's the question. Will Sessions, the eager beaver, the overachiever, Attorney General, put a stop to the Clinton crime wave? There seems to be some issues with that because it continues, as you can see. So, if Sessions is not going to do that, who do we turn to? Batman and Robin? Spider-Man? The Hulk? How about Shaggy in the gang? Maybe Underdog and Polly Purebred. Here I come to save the day. It doesn't appear that Sessions is going to do it. Let's see. Maybe what Sessions need. I was a big Superman guy when I was a kid. I liked Superman. He was a mild-mannered reporter. Clark Kent, go into the phone booth, take off the glasses. Wah! Next thing you know, he comes out of the phone booth. He's Superman. Maybe what Jeff Sessions needs is a phone booth, a cape, and a pair of leotards. Maybe we can get up a collection and buy an old phone booth and some leotards and a cape and send it to Jeff Sessions. Maybe he can step into the phone booth and transform himself into Superman or Super Attorney General. And maybe he will begin to prosecute the Rotten Reverend and stop the effing crime wave. You think I'm exaggerating, don't you? Crime wave. It's not really a crime wave. I mean, she's broken a few laws here and there. It's not. Yes, it's a freaking crime wave. Next example. Margot Cleveland of The Federalist. FEC records indicate that Hillary Clinton's campaign illegally laundered $84 million during the 2016 campaign. A lawsuit filed last week in district court proves that the Clinton campaign and the DNC collaborated to get around the law that limits a single donor to a $2,700 donation to a candidate, $10,000 to a party, and $33,400 to a national party. These are the max donations you can make. Clinton and the DNC used massive straw men contributions papered through state parties to the DNC, to the Clinton campaign, clear violation of the law. And who were the attorneys representing the Clinton Foundation and the DNC to set up this little arrangement? Well, the lawyer for Hillary Clinton, her campaign, is Mark Elias, right? And who is the campaign lawyer for the DCCC, the DNC? Mark Elias. So you had Mark Elias negotiating with Mark Elias to put together this quaint little, essentially, what we call a shell game, a campaign finance scheme, a shell game, a criminal shell game. A criminal shell game. That is what they did. So, do we need to get Jeff Sessions a phone booth, a cape, and a pair of leotards to stop the Clinton crime wave? Because it appears that nobody there in the swamp is interested in stopping the Clinton crime wave. It's a real problem, as are some other things. But at this point, it looks like we are now just days away from getting the IG report. I think a lot of things are going to change. It's going to be like hitting the reset button. At least we'll know where we stand. I believe criminal referrals will be following that. And I believe that Rodenstein's days are numbered. Numbered. I don't see how he can possibly continue being in charge of Mueller and this witch hunt, when in fact the issue now before us that Uncle Bob the executioner is now focused on is not Trump-Russia collusion or even Russia at all. His issue with the president is obstruction of justice, firing Comey. Rosenstein wrote the letter to Trump saying you should fire Comey. That makes Rosenstein a witness. It seriously complicates the issue. He's biased. I don't see how he can continue, especially when you're going down this road. Anything that involves Comey and the firing of Comey, Rodenstein must step back. In fact, what should happen is Sessions should call Rodenstein in his office and say, end it. End it, Rod. End it. That's what should happen. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. You guys have a good night. Bye.